You're listening to The Burning Truth. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, dude and dudettes. I am your host, the Funk Soul Brother Matt Burns, and of course, with me, I've got my broadcast partner. You know, the man of, the UKWA, the voice of the UKWA, the one, the golden tongue, Rumble.
Hi, how are we?
It's, yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Burning Truth is back, and yes, we have been gone for many, many weeks.
We have, due to unforeseen circumstances, we have not been able to be here with you regularly as we would have liked. But we're back now.
Yes, and just in case if anybody wants to know the potential of the reason behind it, and this is where I've got to put my hand up and state it's mostly because of myself. Because essentially what's ended up happening is I ended up being unwell, and at the moment in time, currently I'm the one with all the tech to be able to do the episodes and everything.
Essentially what it is, right, is he's the one who sets the episode up. I just join in through the wonders of technology, and he's been unable to do it due to being decidedly the worse for wear, unwell. Yeah. But he's now back full, fighting fit and ready to go, so here we are.
Pretty much. You may hear a bit of an odd cough here and there, but don't worry, I am fine, I am well, I am good.
He's all good. We're back to full strength.
But you may have also noticed something else. But before we get on to that, before I get on to something else, we'd like to say, we do apologise for the multiple weeks. Yes, there has been a lot going on. We have missed multiple predictions, but like we said, we will play a bit of a catch-up. We will hopefully make up for the content in regards to missing weeks potentially by possibly doing longer episodes maybe. Who knows? We will find a way of getting around it and getting things sorted. Now, as for this week, you may have noticed that we're not exactly live.
Yeah.
And yes, we are a broadcast, and that means we should be live. But the thing is, there is a reason why.
There is.
Which is the fact that, unfortunately, due to massive busy schedule, and this is nothing to do with health at all, it's due to, originally, when we normally do it, we normally consider rebooking it live for another day. Now, the issue that we've got is, on Sunday, I believe you're busy throughout the morning, not the actual night, and I'm busy during the actual time when we're normally going live, because I will be attending FCW.
Ooh, yes. Unfortunately, the time when you're at FCW is when we'd normally be on. I'm busy before that during the day, so
we can't reconvene.
There's no actual time when we can both be together in the same. We're not in the same place, but through the wonders of technology, free at the same time to actually record.
Correct. And then and I know what everyone else is saying. Why don't you do it on one of the other days? Why don't you do it on Monday? Now, Monday can be a bit of a hit and miss. We have done it on Monday, but we don't want to be doing rush episodes. So we'd rather do it when we've both got time.
Exactly.
So there's that. And I know exactly what everyone else is saying. What about Friday and Saturday?
Let's see. Peak wrestling show days.
Right. Now,
almost guaranteed that one of us is going to be busy, if not both, on at least one of those days.
Correct. And unfortunately, most of it already is one half of it is already out, which is me.
Yes.
Now, you're listening to this on the actual Sunday itself, so technically now I'm probably at FCW doing commentary there and getting everything sorted. So yes, I apologise that this is a pre-recorded episode, but we thought we'd just at least get some content out and, share some love, make a return. But at the same time, Friday, I will most likely have wrestled for United Wrestling. So just so you know, yes, this is early on in the week. So just to make everyone aware that on Friday I will have most likely have been wrestling for United Wrestling, and on Saturday, right?
Yeah,
It's a special day because at the moment it's not that day yet, but you're now listening to it the day after.
Yeah, so in the strange sort of universe way, you're listening whilst Mr. Matt Burns probably has quite a spectacular hangover, or at least should, in the general realm of those sorts of things. Have you guessed what day it is yet?
It would be my birthday.
Not going to do the joke I did off air before we started, because, it wasn't really funny the first time. But anyway, happy birthday to Matt Burns for yesterday.
Yeah. All I'll say is I'm 21 again. Tell a joke. I'm actually 32.
Yeah, age is just a number.
I'm not saying anything. No comment to that one. But the point being is this. If you want to send any birthday messages, you're more than welcome to. But that's not the major reason why I've made the return to this week. Originally, I at one point I did consider, should we leave it this week? But no, I thought to myself, no, we've got to get content out. Now, because we are not doing this on the usual typical day, here's where the other message, the other statement, the other reason why this episode is going to be a little bit different than others. Now, we normally talk about the current events, like, the current pay-per-views and everything. Yes, we could potentially talk about that, but we are not doing that for this week because this is a massively pre-recorded episode. We don't know exactly what's going to be happening throughout the week and everything, so instead, we're going to do something a little bit different. But we will be returning to our regular scheduled programming, most likely next week.
So that'll be cool.
Schedule permitted.
Yes.
So this week...
This week, of course, we can't react to Raw and SmackDown and whatever else has happened in the wrestling world because you won't be listening to this on a Sunday, but we've recorded it like the best part of a week ago, so they haven't happened yet. We're not magicians.
Or some of them have happened, and we are sort of a bit behind, and we're still trying to play catch up. But
indeed.
Either way, we're going to be discussing something a little bit different.
We are.
Which is, at this moment in time, we all know that most, companies like Impact Wrestling, AEW, ROH are trying to rise above the ranks and possibly try to dethrone WWE.
Or at the very least, provide them with a level of competition that those of us of a certain age, e.g. myself and Matt Burns, and anyone of a similar age to us, remember WCW providing WWE with in the late 90s.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, actually produced the Monday Night Wars, which I will state produced some of the greatest wrestling.
Yeah, that's basically the thing. Yeah, it definitely did. It produced some of the most, looking back, I can't believe they did that moments, but it also, on the flip side, produced some of the greatest wrestling moments that fans of a certain age still look back on and go,
yeah,
if only.
Yeah, I miss them days. Them sorts of things. But the
them sort of days.
Yeah, but the funny thing about it is we're not just going to be talking about, the past and everything. We're going to be basically talking about, how at the moment in time, a lot of companies have tried to take on WWE. Point an example, and if you want an example of where it could potentially go wrong, let's look no further than Impact Wrestling.
Or TNA, as it was known for the majority of its existence.
Formerly known as TNA, but now known as Impact Wrestling. Now, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but they could potentially still rise up because they're still going. Yes, they are. They could still rise up.
And we're not saying that they couldn't.
Not at all. But they've had to drastically change their format right now
in order to survive, because they aren't in a financial position, as much as they would like, to actually go head to head with WWE, because WWE, the entrenched industry leader, has reserves of money that just lets it do things that maybe a slightly smaller company, such as Impact Wrestling, as much as they might want to, just can't do.
It might not be why I'm saying smaller company, because it's still seen around the world, but the difference is they're not as globally worldwide.
Yeah, let's go with this less established company. They haven't been in existence as long. They haven't had as long to build a global fan base. So, yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, Impact Wrestling are the main example because, well, if you've been a fan of wrestling for the last 8-10 years, you will have seen their attempts at creating legitimate competition for WWE. There was a time around about 5 years ago when a lot of us thought, by God, they might have actually cracked it. But sadly, it didn't turn out to be the case.
No, and unfortunately, with the case, it might have been pushed much too soon and far too early.
They may very well have been trying to run before they could walk.
Potentially. Now, let's do a bit of a history check, where, in case if anybody doesn't know how far, in regards to how TNA and everything was, came to be and everything. Now, a lot of people might always have known TNA or Impact Wrestling when it was just doing its usual, monthly shows, a bit like how WWE do theirs, or their big events every so often, like some companies do from time to time. Now, TNA, or previously before it was even known as TNA, NWA TNA.
Yep.
As it used
started off with an entirely different and novel business model, which in the long run didn't work, but you've got to say congratulations to them for trying.
It wasn't that it wasn't working, the fact that the product grew much bigger than what it was, but what a great way to start it.
Absolutely, to get attention, to say, hey, we're here and we're a bit different. Mm-hmm. You can't get much better than that.
Which, in case if anybody wants to know what they were doing, they were essentially doing monthly big events.
No. They were doing weekly big events.
Well,
weekly big events. They didn't have a TV deal, so they started off doing, instead of a TV show, essentially a weekly pay-per-view every Wednesday night.
Almost every night, but it was getting around and out a little bit differently. Plus, they have different production costs. It was run very, very differently, but it was making noise.
It was definitely making noise. You have to argue, perhaps potentially due to the caliber of matches they were putting on, more so than the way they were doing it, and due to the huge crop of talent that they had available.
Correct.
The legacy of which can be seen for how many of them are now in WWE.
Some of them are in WWE. Some of them have moved on, and everything. But the point being is, back then it was still very, very interesting. It slowly started to grow, getting bigger, and then all of a sudden they then switched to weekly television and
the more standard WWE-esque monthly or thereabouts big shows,
which a lot of people were saying, oh, they're taking them on. No, they weren't. It was just the fact that their current format wasn't being substantial enough and was essentially almost costing them more to do that.
Yeah, the being different for different sake was starting to sort of be more trouble than it's worth, shall we say. And they weren't so much simply taking WWE on because they were using their format. It was just that the WWE format is proven to work. It's one that WWE have used for 35 years.
And it's not just the fact that it's been done. It's not just the WWE format. Essentially, WCW used the same format.
Indeed, it is the industry standard format, thanks to the success that both WWE and WCW, and lest we forget, to a lesser extent, ECW had with it.
Correct, because even ECW did to a degree, but which is very, 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 very interesting. But anyway, we digress. We are beating around the bush. So
Just a little bit.
So essentially, they slowly started to build up with pay-per-views, and then they had different concept ideas, a bit like how we had the X Division.
The X Division, essentially a cruiserweight division, except
With no
the
weight
crucial
limits.
point being there was no weight limit. It was simply for, what was the rather corny catchphrase? It's not about weight limits, it's about no limits. That
limits.
doesn't technically
That
make
was-
any sense, but it was a catchy catchphrase, and it got people's attention, which was the point.
Correct. And then...
And-
Go on.
And I was going to say, from there, the ring became a funny shape.
Yeah, I was just about... You beat me to it there.
Yeah, in an attempt to be different for difference sake again, TNA decided that they would do something that, if I'm very much mistaken, until then no mainstream American company had ever tried,
Mm-hmm.
and opt for a ring not with 4 sides, but with 6.
Yeah.
It was odd. I've got to be honest, when I was watching it on TV at the time, it took some getting used to.
But it was still interesting.
It was interesting. It was the kind of bold move that they needed, and it paid off because it made them visibly and obviously different from their competition at a time when, well, frankly, they needed to be.
Correct. Now, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, was this when it went through, when it went down?" No, if anything, because they were being successful, and this is the odd thing about it. A lot of people might think, and let me just state this: what we have stated so far in regards to our talk in regards to this are actually the Burning Truth views only.
Yeah.
This is personal preference. This
Yeah.
isn't this. Take what we're saying with a pinch of salt. If you don't agree with us, then that's understandable. And let us just state this: our opinions are our own. If you disagree,
That's fine.
It's fine. If you're listening to us on Spreaker, if you're listening to us on YouTube, wherever you're listening to us, if you're able to comment, put a comment. If you want to send a message to us on Facebook, send us a message on Facebook. If you want to go to the website, then send us an email. Tell us why we're wrong or why we're right. Make
it a two-way conversation.
Yes. The funny thing about it is, at this time, and this is my own personal view, I actually thought this wasn't... It's weird because a lot of people are saying, are they in competition? Are they not? Because they're not taking them on the same night. I think at this time, when they were doing the whole X Division stuff with the 6-sided rings, a lot of people are saying, but they're not in direct competition. But at the same time, they were, but not in the way that...
They were in direct competition. They were providing the same product to potentially the same audience, but they simply saw, I think at least, this is again just my opinion, but they saw that a 4-sided ring and all the other things that were a hallmark of what WWE were doing were all well and good, but they saw an opportunity to, take advantage of the fact that they were different and... potentially cash in on the fact that we're not better necessarily, we're just different.
Or another way of stating it, we are a alternative.
Indeed.
And this is the thing a lot of people make a mistake of. And just because you are alternative to the top brand doesn't say, oh, you're not in competition. You still are.
You are still.
But
there is a group out there that fall under the sort of diagram wrestling fans, and you are in competition with every other wrestling company for them. Irrespective of whether you're, a small indie company that maybe plays to a couple hundred people in an armory, or if you're TNA trying to compete with WWE, you're the same group of fans is going to be watching all of that.
Correct. And in some cases, you might even get them all watching all products. in some cases that watch above and beyond all wrestling. But here's the thing: the funny thing about it is, by not directly challenging, TNA was growing because they were pulling in a alternative market, a different, a market that WWE weren't hitting. So the numbers were getting big, were getting good, and a lot of people were saying, well, it's not nowhere near as good. It doesn't need to be. It's still a good idea to have an alternative.
It's a good idea to be an alternative, and remember, good is entirely subjective.
Correct.
If the fans that were watching it kept tuning back in week after week, so they clearly thought it was good.
And sometimes you've got to be different to stand out.
Indeed, if you want to make headway, you have to stand out, and yeah, standing out is being different sometimes. So that worked for them, and it's led to them getting to the point where, with hindsight, perhaps if they'd stuck at it for another, 5 or 10 years to maybe the point they are now, and slowly built a fan base, they could have been direct competition. But unfortunately, a little bit of success seemed to go to their heads a bit.
It wasn't just the fact that it was a little bit of success goes to their heads. And some people may or may not disagree with me on this one. They saw an opportunity to. And this is the issue where I feel that TNA/Impact fell a little bit almost under the WCW issues.
Under the banner of what a lot of people who dismiss TNA like to call it as WCW Mark II. They did a little bit when they did this. For better or for worse, their decision making at this time, probably wasn't in the best long-term interests of the company.
Now, a lot of people can say, well, why are you using that? Why? In case if anybody wants to know what I'm referring to, is the fact that whenever a current or former WWE wrestler was leaving WWE, Impact or TNA would be jumping on them straight away.
Yes, and it was sort of pare down the differences a little bit, because it quickly became to be the case that a third, then maybe half of the roster was no longer the individuals who had never perhaps been to WWE or were up and coming, and maybe that was their long-term aim, but they hadn't got there yet. And more of them were people who still had or possibly had in the past name value from already being in WWE, and who were maybe on the, had reached the peaks and were maybe on the downward path of the second half of their career, and who TNA snapped up. But with hindsight, unwisely, because, as I say, it narrowed the difference.
Some of them,
the more names that were recognised from WWE that were on the TNA roster, it narrowed the difference between the two.
It did narrow the difference, but here's the thing. Some of them were actually good. Great buys.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Far from it. We're not saying that they were all bad. Right?
We're not.
Because some of them, it was saying, oh, wow, they're big enough to take WWE talent. Which is a unique idea, because at the same time they are offering alternative work to other workers, which is still making a great product, which is still
absolutely
different. We're not stating that grabbing all, former WWE wrestlers or it's all bad.
We're not saying it's a bad thing. It's something that's still happening now.
It still is, but they did it at a later on, to the point where it was like, could it be now damaging the product later on, when they had, as much as I thought it was interesting when Kevin Nash was dealing with like the paparazzi segment, that was funny. That was funny. But then they brought in like Scott Hall, Kings of Wrestling. It was nice to see DDP there. It was still nice to see certain people. The one thing that TNA was having good for itself at the same time was the fact that they actually essentially had their own talent, their own originality. So essentially you had your Abysses, you had your Samoa Joes, you had your AJ Styles. Now a lot of people can say, well, they did build them up, or you'll probably have someone who's who's very, very clever and does have the internet and everything and may have actually done some research on this, yes, we do know that AJ Styles was on WWE and Samoa Joe was part of, I believe, Velocity and Metal or Shotgun, but they weren't considered big enough by WWE to be part of the main roster.
Which is why they found themselves with the platform to provide the world with a showcase for their skills in TNA in the first place.
Or Impact Wrestling.
Impact Wrestling, as it's known. I'm just to clarify with people at home, I'm simply referring it to it as TNA because that's what it was known as at the time. I know it's now Impact Wrestling, and I know it's like sort of when WWE changes something, it's like, we want you to say WWE about everything, even when it was the World Wrestling Federation. But at the time, it was known as TNA, and you kind of can't gloss over that.
However, I will state this. Whoever came up with the name TNA, poor choice.
Incredibly. The switch to Impact Wrestling can't have come soon enough because, if ever there was an entirely self-inflicted albatross around their neck, it was that name.
Do you know what makes it worse?
Go on.
I actually could name the person who possibly gave them the idea.
I'm sure you can. I know who I think it was, but I don't know for certain. But
he's on my hate list.
The point is, he's someone who is not universally favoured amongst the wrestling world, and frankly, there are enough other places on the internet that pour scorn on him on a relatively frequent basis, so we're not going to add to it now. The point is, it was an ill-advised choice of name, and the fact that they've changed it and that they're trying to break with that past is probably a good thing.
Which it was during the time. But anyway, the one thing that was also different with Impact or TNA was the fact that they had Sting, somebody who has never been to WWE, who had never gone.
Who was, in all that time, had survived in WCW, and then, well, basically, when he got his guaranteed contract when WCW closed down, I think he pretty much thought at the time that his wrestling career was over, because for a long time he didn't do anything. And then he showed up in TNA, which gave them momentum, because that was something that they had, that they'd beaten WWE to the punch over, that gave them gave them one over WWE in a way that money can't buy.
Yeah, which
Dependent in me insists it can, of course, buy. It was the cost of Sting's contract, but let's just go with money can't buy.
Well, essentially, it was down to personal preference, personal choice, and it might not have been, he may wanted to try somewhere else, try and make a name for himself, try to do something different, and each their own for everybody. He was, they were trying something different. But anyway, let's get back to business, back to where you could potentially see some of the little issues slowly develop with Impact Wrestling. Now, with TNA actually, the one thing I will state is I thought that was clever with it is that they managed to introduce some unique formats, unique matches, unique feuds. But then
they certainly did.
For example, Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles.
The three mainstays of the company.
Right. What was so interesting is and this is for me, I felt as though at one point they were away from each other, and then all of a sudden they were around each other a lot, and I felt as though at one point they overdone it a little bit. They hadn't given them enough time away from each other, but that was at the time with that they had a bit of a different pool of wrestlers there, which is why it's forgivable, because eventually they did end up having them separated for a bit. But the major issue for Impact Wrestling, or should I say TNA at the time, was when they brought in two people who are former
WWE mainstays, shall we say?
Well, former WWE, former WWE and WCW.
Both, yep.
And this is, let me just state this is only my personal preference, my own personal opinion, and if somebody wants to disagree, that's fine. Just understand this is an opinion.
That's cool.
I felt as though when they had Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan come in, at first, wow, this is big. This is
absolutely.
big news.
The initial thing was, oh my god, they're actually going for this. This is serious.
This could be different. And then we find out that they've got creative control.
Which is where the problem starts.
Now,
again, this is just my personal opinion as well for this going forward, because this is where the opinions get fairly strong and where you may start to disagree with us. But yeah, that was the beginning of the end, to be honest. After the initial wow factor of bringing those guys in, suddenly the gap and the difference and the thing that made TNA different to WWE began to be massively erased.
Yeah.
Basically, right, this is my opinion. Soapbox time.
Mm-hmm.
The bringing in of Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan basically was rendering justification for the internet masses to use the phrase WCW2 to describe TNA, because, if I remember correctly, they brought a load of former WWE and WCW guys in, put them in prominent positions over and above existing TNA stars at the time.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, one of the first things Hogan did was make the ring square again.
Ooh.
And put on the back burner the X Division. Basically, it's like, yeah, this is working and we're different and it's going well. Let's throw all that in the bin and just become a clone of the company that went out of business 10 years before. That's got to work.
Or essentially, let's just copy the format that already works for WWE. Which the massive issue I had with it is a bit of the issue that WCW had is the fact that they had so much high talent, but a lot of them had creative control over their contracts. Now, because of that, if they wanted to turn down a certain storyline, they had every right to.
Absolutely. But the hypocrisy of the fact that the existing TNA stars who were the ones who had put the company in the position to in the first place weren't granted such luxury, shall we say. It's a bit of a Mickey take, and it led to, obviously, dissent in the ranks.
Which, essentially, as soon as you saw the ring disappear, the six-sided ring, it was like, they want six sides. The crowd are chanting, they want six sides, and they're not giving it. It's
automatically become a situation where, oh dear, management have moved to the stage where they think they know what the fans want better than the fans do. And
but
that never works out.
But, as an alternative, what they could have still brought, there was a way of bringing back the four sides. And I can think of this right now. They could have brought it back temporarily for, to basically make the six sides more special. Just bust out the six-sided ring for special occasions, special events. Which
Such
would have been
as the Lockdown pay-per-view, for example.
Destination X.
Yeah.
Straight
the
away.
Lockdown pay-per-view, which it features the six sides of steel.
Yeah.
Six-sided steel cage match, which you can't physically have with a four-sided ring. But, Yeah. But
the point being is the fact that it would have made it more special, made it more memorable potentially, and good thing that you mentioned Lockdown, because I'll bring up a point on that probably hurt Lockdown, if anything, was the fact that they had the cage up throughout the entire show.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar situation. What they should have done is similar to what WWE do now with their theme pay-per-views, be it Money in the Bank or
Elimination Chamber?
Hell in a Cell or Elimination Chamber. Yeah, have it there and have one or possibly two matches in the cage, but there's no need for all of them. It's the same with TLC. All the matches feature the use of weapons, but they're all different kinds. So it's not just a tables match. Oh, look, a tables match. Oh, what's in the main event? I wonder. Oh, a tables match. No, it's different. Some have tables, some have ladders, some have chairs. In the same way that, as I say, they only have one or sometimes two Money in the Bank matches, Elimination Chamber matches. The whole card isn't in the chamber, and it doesn't dilute the format.
Correct.
However,
Go on.
I have to say, bearing in mind the limited use of steel cages outside of lockdown in TNA, I think the concept worked.
It did work, but it was still a bit...
However, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, I can see both sides of the argument. Anyway, the point being, all of that originality, the 6 sides of steel, everything else, gone because the 4-sided ring was back. And then, before we could even take a breath and go, not sure that was a good idea.
Let's go. Let's go to Monday night and battle them on the Monday nights.
Let's go 1-on-1 with the biggest, most established show on wrestling television ever, ever, ever. Bad move. Hindsight is on my side with this one, and so it proved, because what did they last? 6, maybe 9 months before they retreated to Tuesdays in a big hurry?
Pretty much.
Yeah. And in that time, even with WWE, I mean, I know they've sunk lower since, but at the time, suffering from low ratings, Impact, or TNA as it was then, didn't make a dent whatsoever.
The issue was, straight away, they were trying to compete with WWE at a time when they weren't as big. They just made some rapid changes,
which they didn't give time to bed in.
And there was the also added fact that straight away they just made massive changes. So straight away you got the Knockouts division being changed. You'd got the Tag division being the way it was. You then got the X Division Championship, which was originally no limits, to now being a weight limited.
Yeah.
So it became
it was a case of
cruiserweight.
Far too many changes at once, all being thrown at you. Not many of them honestly thought through beyond basically, I can just picture the executive meeting now. How about we do this? How about we put a weight limit on the X Division? Yeah, that's a good idea. Do it. And that's probably about as much thought as was put into it, without any idea of the ramifications in the long term.
I don't even think it was that. Me personally, I think Hogan suggested it, and they just went, it's Hogan. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, probably. The idea that there was any opposition to any of these ideas, I find hard to believe. But the problem was, maybe there should have been, with hindsight.
And then it got worse.
As if it couldn't have got any worse after they'd stayed on Monday nights for the briefest of less than a year and then immediately limped back to their previous, I don't remember if it was Tuesday or Wednesday night slot, admitting defeat. You would have thought, oh, okay, that's bad. They've got a bloody nose, but maybe they've learned from this. Spoiler, they hadn't.
And this was to do with storylines.
Yeah. Storylines which, as we say, during the peak of TNA's rise, they were different. They deliberately tried to, within admittedly limited construct of it's got to be a wrestling match between a good guy and a bad guy, they tried to do things a little bit different to WWE. Mm-hmm. Until Hogan got involved, at which point anyone pining for a rerun of the 1980s or the Attitude Era got a horrible mishmash of both.
We basically had Hogan and Bischoff on the television almost every week. And some of it was fine. Let Hogan, it's okay doing the whole nostalgia run and everything. But then they made themselves into a story of Immortal.
Yes.
Was it the Immortals? Yeah.
I think it was just Immortal,
Immortal. Which straight away just went... And me paused for a moment and I just went... Really? You've just basically made the show about yourself.
You've basically just gone straight up into the faces of AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, Abyss, everyone else on the roster who has worked since day one to build that company up and gone, you're not important now, it's about me.
But
And that is the ultimate slap in the face.
But then, at the same time, they could argue, well, we weren't the main champion. We pushed Jeff Hardy, a former WWE wrestler, and
Yes.
Jeff Hardy, who has never really been a heel.
You could argue he's never really been the guy who the crowd can actually get behind and, to a man, hate in the same way that, say, they could for Samoa Joe.
His style doesn't suit it, but here's the thing. I was fine when they turned him heel, because it's something different, something new, a new concept. But they were putting a lot in the basket on somebody who they'd never even seen be a villain or a heel.
Yeah.
I think they were just trying to go for shock TV.
Unfortunately, I think they were. And, well, yes, it was largely shocking. There's kind of got to be a point to the shock. It's got to be a part of the overall process of the story. And it just wasn't. It was just, haha, look at this. Yeah, shocked by that, aren't you? Right, let's move on to the next thing. Haha, look at this. Yeah, you didn't expect that, did you? It became a lot like sort of 2001 era WCW, in that things were happening, your eyes were being constantly assaulted, they didn't link together very well, and not a lot of them made a great deal of sense.
Yeah.
I'll just mention at this point, Samoa Joe randomly being thrown into the back of a van and, to all intents and purposes, abducted and disappearing off TV for weeks. Never mentioned again.
Yeah. It slowly started to get worse, and then eventually they got rid of Hogan, and Bischoff left.
Yes.
So then they were having to pick up the pieces.
They realised it wasn't working. However, by that point, the damage had been done to the point that, they didn't really have a reputation left.
And they were basically, I believe that at the time they were having to change from networks.
Yeah, it began about a 5-year period of, they pretty much went for a different network every year.
I wouldn't say every year, but the point being is they had some, there was blood in the water. They were basically trying to stop the leaking.
The sharks were circling, and I don't think anyone in the office knew how to stop them.
Now, at this time, a lot of people were saying, well, did it get better?
Sorry?
A lot of people were saying, did it get better? It did for a bit.
It did.
It did. It slowly got a little bit better, but then a bit later on, they were. Let me just state this, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't us just bashing on Impact Wrestling or TNA.
We're not. Well, we are, but there is a greater point to it, which we're slowly working our way towards.
We will get to it, but here's the thing: we will be changing it over to other companies soon.
We'll briefly mention other companies as well, but we've nearly reached the end of the TNA segment of this. So,
I believe during this time, this is when they decided to change over to Impact. They became Impact Wrestling by now, so they were no longer TNA.
I believe so, yes. In an attempt to distance themselves from the past and the TNA name, which I know it didn't sit well with a lot of people, including yourself.
Which I know what everyone's probably thinking. Everyone's thinking, well, why is TNA different? It stands for Total Non-Stop Action.
Yeah, but there's something else slightly more long established that it stands for that it's the kind of thing a wrestling company doesn't really want necessarily to get involved with.
And it makes it a bit more of a joke.
A little bit, yeah.
Even though Impact Wrestling was producing some of the best TV material for the Knockout division.
Indeed, but for the entire time that they were there, the TV show was called Impact anyway, so the move to Impact Wrestling was at least a logical one, which is a positive step for the company at that particular point.
Correct.
The less we say about the formation of Global Force Wrestling, temporarily becoming Global Force Wrestling, then becoming Impact Wrestling again, the better. But yeah.
We won't be mentioning that because that's much more recent. The one thing I will state, and I'll just glance over this, the whole Dixie Carter situation that they had there.
Yeah.
They'd done some great stuff early on, but then later on it got stupid to the point where
They lost their way.
potentially, and then they ended up having to have somebody else buy them out.
Yeah, because the company, excuse me, I think I'm going to sneeze. No, it's fine. The company who owned them, for whom Dixie Carter was a representative, saw the scale of the losses, there's no two ways about it, in the immediate post-Hogan era, and decided they didn't want to foot the bill anymore.
And it wasn't just that. The fact that you had Dixie Carter, who had lost her parents' funding, I believe it was,
Yeah.
and on top of that, had another potential buyer. And Billy
Another,
Corgan.
yes, the treatment of him was less than stellar as well.
Right, if you just bear with us, ladies and gentlemen, there possibly might be a bit of scramble due to some technical issues. We do apologise for that. But anyway, we'll push on. All I'll state is the whole issue with Billy Corgan and Dixie Carter. I think what Dixie had promised Corgan was an absolute outrage. The fact that she was saying, "Oh, come," and let me just state this is not me stating facts. This is me stating an opinion. Once again, it comes across as though she'd basically said, "How about you buy some stocks and shares into Impact Wrestling and chuck us some money, help us get bigger." And
So far, so logical.
And you become part of the, on board of making, on board. Yeah, great. But to then allow him to take his money, spend his money, and to say he has no right to control the product.
Yeah, that's bit of a class one slap in the face, that.
So,
quite rightly, he got incredibly angry with this and decided to go to the courts to try and get his money back because he felt he'd been misrepresented.
Correct. Now, as we all know, that's what had been dealt with. Dixie's now no longer involved, has moved on, and that, Impact Wrestling is now under a completely different network. It's no longer under Anthem now, is it?
I don't know, to be honest. I know it was Panda Energy was the parent company in the Dixie Carter days. Anthem then bought it, but who owns it currently? I'm not entirely sure. It may still be Anthem. It may have been sold again.
No, I think it was sold again. I believe it was.
Okay.
I think it was sold again. It might be more so to do with the Fight Network.
Possibly.
Or is it
Bear
Sinclair?
with me. No, Sinclair are the owners of Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I know it's Sinclair, but I'm not sure. It's something similar.
Bear with me. Ladies and gentlemen, talk amongst yourself whilst I popular internet search engine this.
using the beautiful power of the internet.
Oh, yes.
So, yes.
So while Panda Energy owned it, they then sold it on to Anthem Sports and Entertainment. Whether that is still the case, I am awaiting the results of an internet search engine search. No, apparently, according to the world's most popular search engine, parent organisation is still Anthem Media Group.
So it is still Anthem.
Yes.
Right. So Anthem haven't got rid of him. It might be the fact that they just got rid of Dixie then.
Yes.
Right. So it's still potentially Anthem who own it. That's fine.
Yes. According to the internet.
Yeah.
Which, as we know, is far from infallible, but generally search engines...
Actually, are you ready for this?
Go on.
Interesting part. Dixie still owns part of it.
If she does, it'll be in a minority interest stake, like roughly
5%.
10%. 5%, yeah. But Yeah, Anthem Media Group are the main owners.
Well,
And moving-
Anthem Sports and Entertainment, which I believe they own most of it, which is 95%.
Yes. Which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Anthem Media Group. But anyway, we've just about reached the end of what our TNA sort of history lesson. And the point of it is, after all that, after nearly 15 years now of going for it, of challenging WWE inadvisedly, of falling back, they are now currently, they find themselves, I believe, the fourth biggest wrestling promotion in America.
Is this your own personal preference?
It's my own personal opinion. I was going to say I'm going to back it up with more opinion, but as far as I know, and again, I have no proof to back this up. If you know different, you know all the ways to get in touch. Please get in touch with the actual facts. But currently, Impact are the fourth biggest wrestling promotion in the USA. Behind,
Go on.
in third place, Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm.
And in second place, the company we're going to talk about in a minute, the latest big challenger who look like they might give WWE the run for the money that Vince McMahon so definitely craves. You know who I'm talking about, don't you?
No, I have no idea.
Oh, really? You've
course.
never heard of All Elite Wrestling then?
Oh, AEW, of course we have.
Yeah, of course you have. Yeah. So I would say that's the case. I would say that Ring of Honor, who came along, did their thing, did the shows, sold DVDs of them, made sure they made a profit from DVD sales for each show, kept a steady, sturdy fan base, and pretty much stayed out of the negative spotlight generated by some of TNA's headlines, and just stayed the third biggest company for that entire time. Might now be the second,
but then,
or were briefly the second before AEW came along.
Potentially, yeah. And some might disagree with that. Some might say, oh, ROH still because they've been going longer. Some might say it's AEW, depending because of their product and their quality and everything. But it's all opinion. It's all opinion.
It's all opinion.
And me personally, I would say I'd actually have to agree with you. And this is like personal preference. I would say Impact Wrestling is fourth. I would say that. Because as much as everyone can say, but what about, you got all other wrestlers, all other wrestling companies? It's personal preference, yes.
Excuse me.
You will have your CMLL. And in actual fact, I wouldn't even say it was actually fourth, personally. And I've just thought of another company.
I'm just talking in North America, but I'm sure I haven't counted for companies such as
New Japan.
Chikara, New Japan, CMLL, AAA, Full Impact Pro, maybe. I'm just trying to think of others.
Yeah.
Combat Zone.
Yeah. But
who are all chugging along with their fan bases and who may also lay claim to that fact. The point being, that's just my opinion. It's open to interpretation.
But let me just take this. Regardless of what position they could be in the world, or if they're first, second, or third, me personally, I don't think any wrestling company should be really numbered. It's down to personal preference, because I feel as though one thing that we should be all supporting is wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Well, I said I was just merely using numbers to illustrate a point. It's not something that you should do. So, despite the fact I've done it.
No, it's you were just trying to make a point of personal perspective on how.
Yeah.
And this is the funny thing about it. With it, it does bring a bit of an interesting perspective because of it. Because, ladies and gentlemen, let me just briefly talk about WCW. A lot of people can turn around and say, well, WCW, well, take into account, WCW became a serious threat to WWE.
Due to the ownership and heavy financing by Ted Turner.
And
this is where the parallels to AEW come in. But we'll get onto that in just a second.
And the funny thing about it is, a lot of people say, well, a lot of people can look back and say, oh, WCW was a joke. It's like, yeah, it became a bit of a joke because of near the end run,
shall we say,
moments.
Mismanagement towards the end. But that was after a period of sustained success when according to all sources, and that includes WWE,
Themselves.
there was about a year and a half when it was the number one wrestling promotion in North America, and therefore kind of de facto by default in the world.
Yeah. They were actually beating WWE.
And so, yeah, they became a bit of a joke in the end, and that's why they're no longer in business. But it was kind of like the rise and fall, in much the same way that TNA rose and then fell, but TNA didn't rise quite as high, and therefore their fall wasn't quite as spectacular, and they managed to survive. Whereas with the case of WCW, when everything came crashing down, there wasn't a great deal left, and it eventually took the company down with it.
It got bought out.
Yeah.
And sort of continue. It's still sort of. It is in a way almost continued on a little bit. Be it through WWE, but
a little bit, yeah.
A little bit. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah, we digress. As we say, as far as competition for WWE goes, Ring of Honor are out there doing a sterling job, putting out their brand of wrestling, which has served them well since 2002. So they're coming up on their 20th anniversary, so they must be doing something right.
They are doing something right, but let me just state this. Yep. One thing I will state that ROH are doing very, very smartly, they are not trying to take WWE on directly.
They're not. No, as I said, they're providing their own brand, their own form of wrestling to their fans, and basically, they seem happy with that.
Yeah, New Japan are not taking them on directly.
Yeah. Indeed.
But here's my personal thing on WCW. Some of the issues that they had way too many people under open contracts. They had way too many chiefs. Not enough waiters. They had too many cooks and not enough waiters. They had way too many people throwing this and that,
and far too many people with creative control, which meant that certain things just couldn't happen because both sides of the argument would say, well, I'm not doing that, and then propose something that the other side would say, well, I'm not doing that. And the compromise that resulted never pleased anyone, pretty much.
And then eventually it came to where you got Bischoff near the end, who almost bought WCW.
Yeah.
But then didn't buy it because they didn't have the TV time.
No,
because they weren't being offered the TV. Which
the network was not prepared to offer the TV time, which basically killed the product.
Pretty much.
Yeah, but as we say, Ring of Honor are there, they exist, they've got a sound business model, and they're not trying to move drastically beyond it for no reason. They're taking, essentially, the WWE approach, which is we're building up slowly over decades. We'll get there, but we're not going to spend beyond our means to do it, which is entirely sensible.
We're not rushing.
Yeah. Which brings us on to a company which is doing the precise reverse.
In some cases, you could say doing the reverse, but it's different.
The parallels with WCW begin and end with the fact that they have an owner who could, should he so choose, entirely bankroll them and not be overly worried if the company itself never turns a profit.
Correct.
But that's not his aim. The aim is to follow the WWE business model and put on shows which make money. And therefore, they haven't, but because he has that money and they have that behind them from the get-go, they've signed big names, they've started off in arenas, they've not started off in the smaller venues, and they've essentially come in at a level that's got to have some of the executives and people who have worked in Impact Wrestling over the last 15 years looking at them and going, damn, why couldn't that have been us?
Mm-hmm.
We are, of course, talking about All Elite Wrestling, AEW, who, what did they sell their debut pay-per-view out in? 4 minutes?
I think it was something along them lines.
Which conclusively proves that Vince McMahon is right. Not only does he want competition, but there is a market for it.
There is. It's something different.
Yeah, like I say, it's something different. It's something that can come in and off the bat go, well, we could match your production values. and we can match everything that you can do,
Correct.
we might not initially be straight on your level because we're only going to run a show once every 3 or 4 months. We're still trying to sort out a TV deal, but it is our intention to get there, and you should take us seriously because we are a more serious threat than you've had since for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I, for one, am looking forward to it because everyone knows the situation with WWE. They haven't had any serious competition that is able to spend on their financial level for such a long time that Raw, SmackDown, NXT UK, they've created it themselves. They've built themselves their own brands which compete with each other instead of dealing with outside competition. And I'm wondering if that's going to carry on if AEW are as successful as they would like to be.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Yes, AEW is getting some former WWE wrestlers on their roster, but it's not exactly... They are getting some of them to become elite.
They have
fine, but
a good blend.
They've also got their own talent, which is what we were saying that TNA were doing great at the beginning. They were blending in their own original characters or with independent wrestlers in with the mainstream ones.
Yeah.
Having a balance is great, but also at the same time, you've also always got to be looking for the next wrestler, which is one thing that WWE are doing correctly, especially with the whole NXT, the fact that you got NXT UK, all the training schools and everything. So essentially, they were doing absolutely brilliant. It's a bit like what Impact were doing with the whole Al Snow training and everything. They were doing absolutely phenomenal ideas because they were actually trying to make their own next wrestler, their own next superstar. You always got to be looking for the next superstar.
Indeed. And as from a pure wrestling perspective, it's good that AEW exists because now WWE aren't simply there to have free reign to just hoover up any of the world's amazing talent that they want to just then use or abuse by just dumping on Superstars or 205 Live as they see fit. There is a genuine second option for the up-and-coming stars, the already established stars who maybe haven't made it to WWE yet, who can now think, it's the pinnacle, but could I benefit from some time in AEW first?
And some people might say, do I use AEW as a step up for WWE? Or do I try to go to WWE and then if I don't, I should settle for AEW? The difference is it's creating an alternative. And this is the word that you've probably noticed that I've been using throughout this episode is alternative.
As we said, Vince McMahon loves the idea of competition. He wants an alternative to his product because he quite rightly feels, that it's a symbiosis. If you have two companies fighting for the same fans, it pushes both of them on to work harder to produce better products that drive the fans to want to watch one over the other, and it works for the benefit of both companies in the long term.
Also, with it being an alternative, it could also establish and show that there's another market for in a field that not many people might be knowing about and might be unaware of. But the thing is, at the same time, it is alternative. And this is where you make your differentiating facts. This is where you make it stand out. This is how you make it, produce. Where, when I watched all Double or Nothing, it reminded me the vibe of the Attitude Era days.
It did to me a little bit as well.
But the difference was still with the great quality wrestling.
Which is, of course, the core selling point that they have to go by.
Which a lot of people, and we've brought this up as a topic in the past, in regards to how well do you remember the Attitude Era. We're not going to go back onto that subject at all. All I'm just saying to you is the wrestling product.
Yeah, go on.
No.
Oh, no, okay. Well, Matt Burns has a slight cough. I was just going to say, what it is a slight reminder of what the Attitude Era was and why we loved it for those of us who were around to see it. And for those of us who weren't,
Yep.
it's basically all the good bits of the Attitude Era, but recast in a modern light. And it's something that hopefully will make them want to go, on the internet, on WWE Network or whatever else, and revisit stuff from the past, possibly for the youngest fans these days from before they were even born.
Correct.
And go, well, what was all the fuss about with that? So it's generating interest in the past product as well as the current. So it's not a bad thing at all.
It's not, because if you think about it, it's wrestling helping each other in all aspects. And the thing is, if you're able to tell a different story each time and make it, and basically showcase your history, your current, and everything, it works. It works across all platforms, and it's clever in that sense. But here's the thing: as long as they stay in alternative, they can only go so far. If they really want to, the only time I'd say is if they were going to take on WWE and try to take them on one-on-one, the only time that they were able to do it is when they're big enough and they are producing monthly pay-per-views, potentially. That could be the potential time for them to attempt it, but even so.
Well, even so, they will have seen the way in which TNA tried and failed, and of course, hopefully, taken notes. And I think that the guys in charge, so far at least, seem to be aware that, as the tired cliche I used before, they've got to walk before they can run. They seem to be keen to take it steady, which is good, because they're coming along, they're doing a show every now and again, they're building a fan base. I think they've now got a TV show, or at least there's one in the works, which means there'll be a weekly outlet for their stars to get them established.
Yep.
And I also think they're doing right in that they have a good blend. It's not simply WWE cast-offs, and it's not simply guys that no one's heard of before. There is a nice blend. For every Chris Jericho, there's a Kenny Omega. For every Dean Ambrose, or what's he called in the Indies? I forget.
John Moxley,
there's what are the tag team called?
Young Bucks.
The Young Bucks, And for every someone in the middle, like Cody Rhodes, there's a guy like... I'm struggling to think of the name of someone who is an AEW guy who hasn't previously been in WWE, but who's on the rise. But
Kushida Okada.
That's a good one. I was going to say Ty Dillinger at this point, but that's not his name in AEW either, and he is a former WWE guy, so he doesn't count. Sean Spears. Yeah, they have a good blend of both former WWE guys with name value, former WWE guys who maybe didn't get the opportunity in amongst the huge roster that WWE has. They maybe got lost in the shuffle, and talent who's never been to WWE who are using this as an opportunity
either to try and get the name out, or they could be using it any way they want. But the point being is, it's a different idea, different product.
And the blend of talent seems to me to have been carefully considered, and from my standpoint, after one pay-per-view, it seems to be pretty well measured.
Correct. And the one thing I will state in regards to it is, if they do become the second biggest company in the world, and they want to become number one, don't panic that you are number two.
They've got to be in this for the long haul. If they want to become number one, they've got to be aware that you have to build up slowly. Look at TNA. It took them 10 years to challenge, and they failed. You've got to be aware that even with the budget they've got, which, to the best of my knowledge, again, this is just my opinion, I don't know that it's fact, to the best of my knowledge, dwarfs anything that TNA were ever able to work with, they've got to be aware that it might take them 10 years to be a legitimate threat. I think they are, and I think they've got that to their advantage.
Yeah, and here's the thing, you've got to stay, and this is the issue, this is the one thing they've got to understand. If they do go for the leap and go for the head-on, they've got to understand, if they're going to be taking the head-on, it should be that they should be able to just go, boom, head-on, and keeping that stability.
They've got to understand that, unlike TNA, they've got to understand that if they don't beat WWE, straight away.
It's not that straight away.
It's
they
it's
haven't
not
got
an
beat
excuse
him.
to retreat. It's not an excuse to retreat. They're not going to beat WWE straight away. But if they're going to go head to head, they've got to be. I said they've got to be in it for the long term. They've got to be aware that, well, Raw's been going 27 years. SmackDown just over 20.
What they've got
You've
essentially, what essentially they've got to do is if they're going to be trying to compete, they've got to understand that they will miss some weeks, they will lose some weeks, they will, they could just draw with them, and that's a good thing if they're drawing with them, because then that means they're doing something right, and then eventually they can build up to overtaking. But here's the thing: they need to find out if they can keep their establishment currently going by themselves without the competition first.
Yeah, exactly. They need to make themselves viable as an alternative. They need to set themselves up in a way that after the initial expenditure to get the brand out there, the company, while it doesn't necessarily need to turn a profit, it does, if you know what I mean, because they want it to be able to stand on its own 2 feet. It's not really competition if it's subsidized,
And it's not competition if they basically go, let's go for an all-out attack. Take one swipe, don't do any dent, and then WWE hits back and obliterates them. Despite
the name of their initial pay-per-view, they've got to know that all or nothing is possibly the worst approach they can take. It's got to be a sustained attack over a considerable amount of time.
Correct.
But I think they know that, and I think the irony of that pay-per-view name was not lost on them. True. But let's hope I'm proved right.
True, but at the same time, regardless of it's a small company when you're first starting out, it is a little bit all or nothing on your early shows.
As I said, the irony of that name I don't think was lost on them.
Agreed. But here's the thing. But anyway, we've talked quite a bit about all this, and this is the thing. My personal view on this is the fact that it's a great alternative. Keep it as an alternative for now. There's no rush for it to take on WWE.
Yeah,
you can become a second biggest company in the world, but look at it this way. WWE, you could be saying, well, we're still second. Sometimes you've got to play the waiting game.
Yeah, sometimes you've got to play the long game. WWE is now in an entrenched position where it is not going anywhere.
Yes, Yes, it is on top of the mountain.
But it is not going anywhere, and it is also in the financial position through years of being on top of the mountain that should AEW find a formula that works and become the number one promotion, it doesn't mean they're going to stay there. WWE will have the ways and the means to fight back, and so they've also got to remember that, like as I said, reaching the top of the mountain is no guarantee you'll stay there, and they've got to keep going. Correct. They can't just be like WCW and be like, yeah, we've made it to number one. Right, now let's implode noisily and fade into obscurity.
Essentially, what you're trying to say is focus on your own product.
Exactly.
But anyway, that has been our view in regards to alternative wrestling companies in the world, or alternative wrestling companies that have tried to compete against WWE. Now, we're not stating that AEW are competing with WWE at the moment in time.
Beyond the simple fact that they're another wrestling company, so that comparison is always going to be drawn.
Correct. But they're not actually taking them on head-to-head at all.
No.
Let us just state this. The reason why we've just done this talk is basically so we can basically just highlight some certain details in regards to where AEW can potentially go, what mistakes they could end up making,
and how they can avoid them wherever possible.
Possibly avoid them, but then again, what we have stated here today is not facts.
Again, this whole thing, it's just our opinions. We're not going to be overly worried if you disagree with them. That's kind of par for the course.
Correct.
But if you do disagree strongly, get in touch. Make this a two-way conversation. Let us know why you think we're wrong, provided, of course, you can back it up with a certain amount of...
Well, no. What my colleague, what my broadcast colleague is stating, whether you agree with us, whether you would disagree with us, let us know if you want to messages and everything. We'll give you shout outs and everything. Probably even mention what you stated.
Yeah,
on it.
we're not infallible. There is a chance there's something important that we've missed, and so if there is, and you have a burning desire to point it out to us, yeah, we'll acknowledge that.
And it's not just that. We don't want to just be us telling you our thoughts and say, this is what we think, and it's right. Far from it.
We're not saying that for a second. This is what we think.
This is what we think. This is what we think, and surprisingly, we've both been quite similar ourselves with each other. I actually expected us to be arguing a little bit.
I've got to be honest, I expected a lot more use of soapbox from both of us. It's been quite smooth sailing, but yeah, we're not saying that because we serendipitously happen to agree that we're right and you're not. There is no such thing as a right answer here. This is just our take on it.
This is our take on it, and surprisingly, we both actually agree with our own take on it, which is go smack me.
We're both actually almost speechless with that, and that never happens.
But the point being is not everyone will agree with us, and we are actually interested in to find out your thoughts and views. So let's see what we don't want, and this is the one thing we don't want. Oh, you're wrong because you're stupid.
No, we want considered thoughts of why we're wrong. That you can, like I was just going to say, don't just be like, nah, I don't agree with you. If you don't agree with us, that's fine. But give us a reason why.
Correct. It's fine if you want a message that you don't agree with us. That's fine. That's great. But you're more likely not going to get shout-outs for it because, yes, we know you probably disagree with us, but if you disagree with us and tell us why, that makes it a conversation.
Exactly. Like we said, disagreeing is fine, but reasons why are important. It's kind of, it's a two-way thing. It's like the Vince McMahon thing of give me competition. Yeah, if you have a differing opinion and you have some way of backing it up,
well, not backing it up.
Let's have it.
It's not even backing it up. If you have an alternative view that actually, that we can't see, tell us. Point us to it, because here's the thing. By just pointing it out, we may not agree with you, or in actual fact, it could actually even convince us to turn around saying, you know what, he's got a good point there. I agree.
Yeah. And for the general good of wrestling fans being as knowledgeable as they can be about the product they love, that helps everyone.
It does, and here's the thing. There's no right, no wrong answers.
There certainly aren't. It's just a case of what you believe, backed up wherever possible, with something you've seen that shows that is the case, or, evidence is important here. It's like I say, we've tried to back up everything we've said so far with examples. So if you can do the same, that'd help your case.
Correct. But also, if we have made any mistakes, please point them out to us, because
politely.
Please point them out to us, because as we stated, we're not is it infallible or fallible?
We're not in. I think it's one of them where both works, but I always say infallible.
Basically, we're not perfect.
We get things wrong sometimes, and we're better people for being able to admit that.
Correct. And well, it's not saying that we're better.
No, I'm saying we are better as people because we can admit we occasionally get things wrong.
Basically, what we're saying is we can be wrong, and we're not afraid to admit it, because taking a good example of this would be when I made a few mistakes on past episodes. And what did I immediately do on the next episode?
Stand up and say, yep, I got that wrong.
And here's why.
Yes.
But anyway.
So I think that pretty much wraps everything up.
That is nicely wrapped up. That is possibly where we're possibly going to be leaving it there. If there's any topics you want us to discuss for another week or for another sort of long session episode, give us a shout out if you got any interesting subjects you want us to talk about. But as for next week, we will most likely be returning to our regular schedule program. Or to be honest with you, one thing I am going to state is if there is any weekends that we can't do any of the usual, a bit like this weekend, how we've got it that we're both busy. if there is any pre-recorded episodes to be done, we could actually end up making them episodes the long ones, as in the ones like these, where we pick a subject and we just run with it.
And we just talk it through. Yeah, because that's a good contrast point to the regular episodes where we're just talking about what's actually happened and, trying to be objective rather than just purely critical, because that's far too easy.
Correct. And it's more or less of us looking into the past as well.
Yeah, which is always a good thing.
Correct.
Okay, on that note, I believe you have some plugs to do.
I actually do, so I'll get them under the way quickly. But anyway, let me just state this right out the gate. Because, yes, I know a lot of people are going to be saying, well, aren't you the owner of UKWA? Yes, I am. But one thing I will state, last week I was actually at Shropshire Wrestling Alliance. Absolutely fantastic show. Amazing. Always, as I've always stated, check out your local wrestling shows, of course. But anyway, let's just get straight to the plugs straight away. So please check out UKWA, also known as UK Wrestling Alliance, UKWM, also known as UK Wrestling Media, Manchester Pro Wrestling Academy, as beginner classes are on Monday, £10 per class, 7 p.m. till 9 p.m. If you're after location details, please check them out on their social media, most likely Facebook. Please check out JG Pension and Stitching. Please check out, charitable organisations like Mind and Change for Health and Wellbeing. Please check out Team 4-Star on YouTube, especially with their Dragon Ball Z Bread series and other series that they also discuss. Please check out bands like The New Breed, Camens, Blackpool. Absolutely fantastic music, and I can also state brilliant bands. And of course, as always, please check out Botchamania and Wrestle Crap. And of course, you're welcome, Matthew.
And RD.
And of course, please also check out OSW Review, who, if I'm not mistaken, you've also got someone from Botchamania named Matthew who pops up on there as well.
From time to time.
Interesting show, I will say. All I'll say is the second you watch one episode of OSW Review, I guarantee you will at one point say, what bar are they? But anyway, that's not actually us, but you'll have to check out OSW Review to find out more about that. Please check out Phil DeFranco, who's always bringing out news, interesting news, especially on YouTube. Bit of a unique format. Please check out When Fandom Strikes, amazing singer. She's on YouTube, and I actually found her content on TikTok. Absolutely, especially with her things that keep me up at night. Absolutely hilarious. Then you got Luke Moto with his vlog, with his I believe almost weekly random episodes and everything, which is very interesting. And in one of the episodes, even I'm in it as a special guest.
Stoner Crows.
But anyway, let's continue on. Please check out for any content in regards to Marvel, anything geeky, DC, comics. Please check out Geek of the Week podcast, which actually stars, I believe, Magic Mark Adams.
Magic Mark Adams, legend.
Absolute legend. Please check out one company I will state, and this is an interesting one, which is Kayfabe Music UK. If you are after some quality custom-made music, be it if you're a wrestler, you're a ring announcer, or even after somebody who's after a cool theme music, please check them out, because I will state this. We are, the burning truth is actually possibly considering checking out Kayfabe Music UK for even a possible new theme music
for the podcast, which you can also get that music for. Well,
not for the podcast, for the broadcast, as we say. But anyway, broadcast, podcast, either way, we could be potentially checking out their content to find out some interesting new theme music for ourselves. And of course, please check out Turnbuckle TV, where you can watch UK Wrestling Alliance and many, many other companies like Nothing But Wrestling. I believe Academy Pro Wrestling just recently joined on there. Fusion Pro Wrestling.
There are dozens of companies on there, and it's all for the bargain price of just $3.99 a month.
$3.99 a month. So essentially, everyone can turn around and say, that could be a lot. Do you know how much that is? A month.
$3.99 a month.
$3.99 a month. Do you know what that is?
Like half an hour's wages?
Not even that. You ready for this? Do you want me to break it down even more?
Go on.
£1 a week.
£1 a week. What can you even get for £1 a week in this day and age? I'll tell you what you can get. Turnbuckle TV.
Exactly. Do it. I believe it's even though I don't agree with the fact that the Freddo price has gone up, you could probably get about 1 or 2 Freddos.
Yeah, possibly.
Sorry, yes, I know, I'm showing my age.
Yes. Space Invaders, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. But anyway.
But we digress.
We digress. The point being is you can get some great quality wrestling for just
From dozens of UK promotions that you won't get in many other places.
Correct.
For just $3.99 a month.
Spot on. But anyway, and of course, please always check out your local wrestling shows. Just for some examples would be United Wrestling, which they're actually having a show on this Friday. So please check them out. There's also Academy Pro Wrestling, Future Championship Wrestling, who have also got a show on this Sunday. Then we've got Fusion Pro Wrestling, Pro Wrestling View, who have actually got a wrestling show the following week.
Awesome.
Which is the following Friday. Well, actually, I just mentioned that United Wrestling has got a show on Friday. My mistake. I've just realised this is a pre-recorded. So, in actual fact, United's just gone.
It was a couple of days ago. Oops.
And Future Championship Wrestling is probably happening as I'm speaking to you now. Damn it.
Check them out anyway. They'll have more shows in the future.
Wait. And there's a point on me making a mistake.
Yep. Immediately, you've realised, you've owned up to it. Yep. Not a problem.
But anyway,
we're fallible. Stuff happens.
Exactly. But anyway, the point being is, this Friday coming up, as this will be going out on Sunday, Pro Wrestling for You will be actually having a show on as well. So please check them out. And there is many more. Is there any wrestling companies you want to mention yourself?
From my point of view, there's PCW, there's Future Shock Wrestling, and if you're down in my neck of the woods, there's Progress Wrestling, there's WAW, there's Falling Star Wrestling, and many others. LDN, I think. I'm not that close to London, but there's them. Basically, wherever you are in the country, get on your internet search engine, have a look, because there's bound to be a wrestling promotion in the nearest big town to you.
Correct. And of course, there is, the last thing I'm going to be mentioning to you to check out is the Burning Truth website, which is www.theburningtruthuk.com, where you can potentially listen to us live, be listening to past broadcasts, past interviews, where we have some old written show reviews and audio show reviews, where you can get merchandise, and of course, yes, I have been stating for ages that there will be a blog at some point. That's on hold completely entirely, so that there's currently no blog at the moment. But
there's just too much other stuff going on between us.
Correct.
We just don't have the time. Like we said, we're fallible. Sorry about that. Hopefully it will restart in the future, maybe, but don't hold us to that.
Correct. There's also a contact page where you can get in touch with us, and some of the things that we've already discussed is, at the moment in time, we've got all the links on there. And, of course, please check out our social media, which is Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, which I'll spell it out. The Twitter handle is a little bit different, which is WRESLING4THWALL. And we're also on Instagram. And, of course, please check out Spotify, because we have past episodes on there. Now, that's all the plugs done out in a way. And there is actually one more topic I wanted to discuss right now.
Okay.
Before we go, because I wanted this to be outside of the episode.
Right.
Especially in regards to the nature of it. Now, most of the time when something like this happens, we normally hit it off early on in the episode.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one piece of news that we will be most likely be adding a tribute on the next episode as well, but we aren't doing a minute of silence on this episode because I feel as though we got a lot out, and it's a bit of a
it's a difficult situation because the episode isn't live, but we'll address it next time. And if you're anywhere near Preston, I believe PCW are doing a tribute show fairly soon, so if you can get to that, that'll be the ultimate way to pay tribute.
I think they might have just missed it. They might have just missed it potentially when this goes out. But all I will be stating is this episode of The Burning Truth is dedicated to Lionheart, who unfortunately had recently passed away.
This episode dedicated to the memory of Lionheart. Yep. Rest in peace.
And yes, we did put out a post in regards to this, and let us just state this. Condolences to his family and friends, work colleagues, and everything. But please, 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 let us just state this. Please respect the family, friends, and work colleagues.
In this time of, need, I'm sure they'll want to be left alone. Please respect their wishes.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, if you are in the Preston area, the PCW show, which may or may not have already happened, will be a night of tribute to Lionheart, and all proceeds will be donated to his family. So I think that's a nice touch.
Correct. And let me just state, is we're not doing the minute silence on this episode. We will do the 1 minute silence on the next episode, which will be live.
The next episode when we are live, yes.
Yeah, just so we can basically put it out. We just thought we'd just mention it right now. Absolute gentleman. I can honestly say he has touched so many people. He has
positively influenced so many people's lives, and it's an absolute tragedy.
It's unfortunate what has happened, but with that state, all I will just state is if anybody does need to talk or anything, please just state you're not alone. You can talk to anybody, and the Burning Truth door is always open. My door is always open. I'm sure John Ballor's doors will always be open if you need to message or send any DMs. But
absolutely.
Let me just point out this. Even if you don't talk to us directly or anybody or anything, as long as you are talking to somebody and acquiring any help if you need it, then we are happy for you.
Yes.
So with that, yes, I know we probably ended this episode on
a slightly somber note.
But we will be back next week to our regular scheduled programming. We will be doing our tribute in regards to Lionheart, and let us just state, please, 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 as always, for the next episode, please stay well, stay safe. We will catch you next week, but until then, catch you later, and please, please, please check out your local wrestling.
Thanks for listening, and good night.